by many to be the most beautiful hike in Western Europe, and some people would even argue the world, the Tour de Mont Blanc, or the Mont Blanc Circuit, travels through France, Switzerland, and Italy through the majestic European Alps. You're going to walk through 7 valleys, through cute little villages with various different cultures, different foods, and different languages, through forests and alpine meadows, while gazing up at massive granite peaks. You could be enjoying a gourmet French meal one night and then downing a fabulous Italian pasta the next. It generally takes 10 to 12 days to cover the entire 110-mile or 170-kilometer trail. Most folks hike it counterclockwise from Chamonix in France, so they can come upon the view of Mont Blanc from its most scenic vista. However, like we learned from episode 5 with Rosemary Burse, there are several advantages of hiking against the crowd. When you travel clockwise on this trail, you'll have the trail all to yourself in the morning and you get to meet new people each day. This adventure is more difficult than most of the trips that we explore on the Active Travel Adventures podcast, but it's such a stunning trail with such epic beauty that I had to cover it for you. This is a trail that you must train for so that you can enjoy your hike rather than getting on-the-job training. There are some steep uphills and downhills, and you're going to be hiking 5 to 8 hours a day. However, if you're fit and you do train, you can do this hike. No mountain gets overly high. The highest is under 8,800 feet, which is 2,700 meters, so altitude sickness shouldn't be an issue. For the truly fit, you can even backpack this trail. However, it is possible to day hike it from one village to the next or one hut to the next. There's plenty of accommodations along the way, including the mountain huts that you can reserve, and then you can change dates if you need to, if you have to change your pace a little bit. Again, this is similar to the Swedish Kungsleden trail that we covered in episode 5. This is a trail you can plan on your own, or I've got a recommendation for a company that will affordably make the arrangements for you to do a self-guided hike. They'll transfer your main luggage every day, so all you have to do is bring your day pack. And that's a slightly shorter hike. Or you can do like our guest today did and have the grand guided all-inclusive tour that combines some kayaking and some biking along with a small guided group. One thing I love about this hike is you can truly make this your own hike. You can make it as short or as long as you'd like. You can do it on a dirt cheap budget. You can backpack it. You can go hut to hut. You can go to pension, a little bit step up. Or you can go to nicer hotels. So you can do the flexibility of both time and budget and get to witness some of the most beautiful scenery in all of Europe. So let's get this podcast going. You're listening to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks. I'm happy to introduce to you Linda Cohen-Dickens, who with her husband did the Tour de Mont Blanc in the summer of 2017. Hey Linda, thanks for joining us. Could you please introduce yourself, maybe tell us your age and a little bit about yourself?
My name is Linda Dickens. I am almost 64. We just moved to California 2 years ago to be closer to the kids, but we actually like it out here better than Florida because we're hikers and outdoors people, and we have loads of opportunity between Tahoe, Yosemite. We had Napa, San Francisco, so we live in an area where we can do a lot of outdoor activities.
You recently did the famous Tour de Mont Blanc with your husband, and that's going to be our focus today. Can you give us a brief overview?
So in June, we hooked up with Active Adventures for the second time. We did Peru with them 2 years ago. It was hiking the Mont Blanc circuit for 12 days. We loved Active Adventures for the first tour and decided to go again with them for this year. They do multi-activity, so you have mostly hiking, but you have usually kayaking and biking for a day or so, and then an extra day to do whatever you want. The trip was well organized. They have you well prepared. It was a reasonable price, we felt, for everything we've got. The tour leaders were always amazing. And the Mont Blanc, basically, you went through Italy, Switzerland, and France. You hiked 8 to 12 miles a day, had great meals, and it lasted for 12 days with amazing people.
And did you meet people from all over the world? Or tell us a little bit about the people that you traveled with.
So this group was, the demographics was 58 to about 68. the majority from the West Coast, more so from Colorado, California, and there were 2 people from the East Coast. But they were all within those demographics. There was 2 couples, there were 4 solo women, there were a father and son, and then a couple of solo men. But very different from the Peru trip. This is what these demographics were. And everybody was basically the same activity level and was able to do everything that we did every day.
And what kind of activity level would you, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being very difficult, not Everest difficult, but very difficult for an adventure, what would you put this at?
I would say most of the days, other than, of course, the hiking wise, the kayaking was probably a 1 to 2. But the hiking, I would say between 4, maybe some 5s. I mean, we didn't do any rock climbing, but there was some intense fields, snow fields that we climbed, snow bridges that we crossed, mountains that we went up. And it was 8 to 12 miles of hiking. You know, you broke for lunch, but they kept the pace even. So there were really none of us that hung behind or lagged. We pretty much came up with the guide who was from Chamonix, and he was wonderful.
And what would you, I know that you're quite an athlete. Would you say that the other participants on this tour were as athletic as you, or could somebody that's not as ambitious as you do it?
I actually think they were more athletic. I think they were more athletic than us because the Colorado and California people were all avid hikers. And we just moved to California, so we're not hiking as much, you know, maybe once every couple of weeks. But, you know, we kept up with them. We were probably the least balanced with that activity level. I think they were above us, but, you know, we held our own and had no problems.
Is it something that somebody like me who lives in the flatlands with no mountains could train for? Or is this something that might be too ambitious for somebody like me?
I think absolutely anybody could do it. We did Peru living in Florida. So I think it's slow and steady gets you there. And you just have to have a positive attitude. I mean, there were some tough parts, but you just forge ahead with everybody else. Because you have to. You can't lag behind, and you don't want to hold anybody up. And everybody helps each other.
And so that encouragement does help a little bit because you know it gives you that extra spurt, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, when you know you're ahead 8 to 12 miles, like the next day, everybody was so supportive and we all just got along so well that we were like one big team, you know, climbing the mountains.
And you didn't know any of these people before this trip, right? They're just people that you got matched with because of this tour. Is that correct?
We actually knew one fellow that did Peru with us 2 years ago. He was from Colorado. And he does probably about at least 2 big trips a year. So we did know Phil. He was with us on this trip.
And so at the end of the day, these are pretty grueling days. So how are you feeling at the end of the day? And then tell me how you feel in the morning.
So in the morning, we all got together for breakfast at the hotels that we were at. And we would have picnic lunches every day. So they would spread out little baggies with parts of our lunch. The women would usually take the bread because it was light, but there was always cheese, fruit, salads. We would pack our bags. They would either drive us to the starting point or we would hike to the starting point. And John Mark, who was our leader, would say, we're going to have lunch up there. And we would be looking up there and saying, it's way up there. We're going to have lunch. And then you start hiking and the time goes so fast because the views were amazing. And then you would keep looking back at the village you hiked up from and you would be amazed that we got that far. Then they would spread out our lunch and we'd have a beautiful picnic lunch every day. We'd sit, we'd chat, we'd rest a little bit, and then we would get up to finish the hike. the end of the day, we'd get back, meet for wine about an hour later, and have a great dinner and just talk about what we did and, what the next day was going to be like. But it was just an amazing feel of accomplishment when you were done. Because in the morning, you had no idea how the day was going to go. But there was definitely a feeling of accomplishment between all of us at the end of the day.
And even though you're hurt, and even though you're exhausted and probably a little sweaty and dirty, why do you do trips like this instead of sitting on a chaise lounge in the Bahamas with a fruity drink or something?
It's really knowing that we did it. I mean, when we did the Inca Trail in Peru, to tell everyone you did that, when we told people we were hiking the Mont Blanc circuit, they're amazed. And when we finished the tour, we're already looking for what we're going to do in 2018 because the tours themselves they made you feel that you were really capable of doing more than you ever thought you could. And we don't want to stop. I mean, we're hooked. And I do marathons, and some of these were harder than a marathon, but more satisfying because it's such a different area that you're going to. And the people you meet, even the people, not the people you're hiking with, but the people you meet at the hotels and the people that you meet on the streets or on the path, that's what makes it amazing.
I totally agree. I mean, it's like you're mirroring my exact feelings. So it's amazing. Do you feel changed when you come back from these trips somehow?
Well, we never stop talking about them. We definitely feel changed because we've never really done this before, and we're both in our 60s. And the fact that now that we're starting these adventures gives us a lot to look forward to in the future because it just shows us that there's really no limit.
I totally agree. What was the thing that made you take that first leap to say, hey, I think I'd like to try that? I mean, it's not a normal trip. Most people don't do trips like this. They think we're crazy. They're excited for us, but they think we're nuts.
I don't really know how. I must have Googled Machu Picchu because we always wanted to do that. And I looked at Active Adventures, and a lot of people, we live in a 55 and over, and a lot of them do much less vigorous tours. And Active Adventures was more than, let's say, a Backroads. It pushed your limits a little more. They told you exactly what you were in line for. They really explained everything and what the itinerary was. And they seemed, where they had the kayaking and the biking, we liked that mix, but we liked the hiking more. And a lot of them don't offer you as much hiking in a trip as we wanted. And they answered every question. They were always available to answer any more questions we have up until the day we left. And they were very supportive. So we would like to go on all of them. That's why we're planning the next Active Adventure trip.
Do you have a place planned in mind?
Well, we're thinking either New Zealand. There were people on our trip. This was a very unusual trip from the last one. The last Active Adventure trip, only Phil had been on another one. This trip, we'd been on 2 of them. Everyone else, except one person, this was her first, had been on 3 to 5 Active Adventure trips. So some of them talked about, of course, New Zealand, Nepal. There was a girl there that did Nepal and was at the airport when they had the earthquake. She had stories about that. Phil has done Patagonia, some other one in South America. So it was an unusual trip where they had done many Active Adventure trips and talked to us about them.
They did screen you to let you know physical-wise, so they wouldn't let, say, a 10-year-old kid do this trip. They had some kind of parameters to be sure somebody was suitable for the trip.
They do ask you quite a few health and activity level questions. The Peru trip, there was a family of 4, and there was a daughter that was 15. I am not sure about the age parameters because there were probably a 10 or a 12-year-old could do this trip, and they do have some families, but they do ask you a lot of questions so they know where you fit in the trip. And they'll be very honest with you if they have any questions about if you'll be capable of it. They don't want anyone to have a bad trip.
How would you describe the landscape? I'm sure the pictures I've seen don't do it justice.
We went in June, so there was still quite a bit of snow. And they said it would have been gone in 2 weeks. But June is a good time for us to go away. The mountains, now that we moved to California, we have a Mount Diablo behind us. That's it. These mountains were mind-boggling. They were just spectacular. And because there was still a lot of snow on them, they made them even more beautiful. And the fact that you would, hike into the valleys, climb the mountains, the terrain was completely different. I mean, we slid down snowfields, we crossed snow bridges, we hiked through cow pastures and sheep pastures. But the scenery was always spectacular. And we were very lucky. We had 12 days of gorgeous weather. Sometimes it does rain. I think it has some rain, but we were really very fortunate. But we were prepared. I mean, we had our rain gear, if it did, so we were never unprepared for what to expect.
And they are transporting your luggage every day, right? You're not backpacking, you're day hiking, correct?
We're day hiking. We had a driver, Corinne, that was amazing. They took our suitcases to the next hotel. There was one hotel, I believe, in Courmayeur. We stayed 3 nights. That was the longest. But she either picked us up if we had to get driven to the next hotel when we were done with our hiking, or we hiked to the hotel and then our luggage would be there. And they were amazing as far as transporting everything, getting all the lunch stuff together for the next day. We never had to worry about anything.
And how about the dinner? She said the lunches were good. How are dinner?
Dinners were great. I mean, we went to everything from pubs to the restaurants that had dinner. The last dinner, they really go all out. We had foie gras, we had duck, we had wine. It was amazing. But the dinners, some of them were just pubs, and some of them were just local restaurants that were just great to meet the locals.
Any interaction with the locals stick in mind mostly when you think, is there something like, oh, I really remember so-and-so from this pub, or somebody I met in the street asking directions? Do you have any local culture stories you could tell us?
There was a dinner we had. One of the couples was having their 30th anniversary, and they ordered something where they cooked for themselves, and it was hot in the pub, and they decided they were going to cook all their food. So just having that hot plate on the table itself made everyone really hot. And we were just cackling. We were laughing because it took them a long time. Some of us moved to another table to have dessert, and the waitress was just hysterical watching a bunch of Americans just goofing around in the pub. So when we went back to, this is Chamonix, when we went back to Chamonix about 7 days later, we saw the same waitress sitting at a table with her friend eating lunch. And we went up, oh, how you doing? Of course she couldn't forget us. And she looked at us and all she could say was, are you still here? So that was great. But we also stayed at a very interesting hotel in Les Houches. And the caretaker was the granddaughter, had been in the family since the late 1800s. And we saw on the wall a paper that had a lot of Hebrew writing, and we're Jewish, so we asked her about it. Her grandmother had saved some Jews during the war, and one of the fellows that she saved had written a book about the story of her saving the Jews. She had gotten recognized years later. And I actually said to the owner, I'm going to order this book right now while we're here. Went on Amazon, and I said to her, the book's going to be waiting for me so I can read the story about your grandmother. And that was amazing.
What an amazing story.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Do you have any particularly funny memory of something that happened while on the trip? Something that makes you laugh every time you think about it?
They had a thing called a Freedom Cup. And it's this big stone cup with a top on it. And they put this liquor in it. And the liquor's on fire. And you have this saying, and I will find it when I do the recording, that you pass the cup, you take a sip, and it's really, the first time you do it, it's like, whoa. But you can't stop passing it around because it's bad luck until the liquor is all gone. So you'd say this thing, health to you and peace, and then you would take a sip and pass it to the next person. And we finished it, and it was just a thought that we did it. But it's something that they do there for peace and friendship. And that was, I think, the second to last dinner we did it.
I hope somebody took a photo or a video you can share.
I will send you the photo of one of the girls drinking from it.
Oh, did you have to use crampons or anything? Or is there anything technical? Or is this basic hiking if you know how to hike?
Well, I asked them ahead of time. We took our sticks. Of course, we took our walking sticks with us to Peru. And I asked them ahead of time, do I need my walking sticks? And they didn't say emphatically yes. We took them anyway. And I said to them, you need to tell people they need to bring walking sticks because you really did need them on this trip. All of us had them. One girl actually didn't bring them and they lent her one, which she used. But really just the walking sticks you would need. They give you a packing list that to the T, we took every single thing on that packing list. Not that we used everything. Thank God we didn't need rain gear. But they had everything you could possibly need during those 12 days. And I would say definitely just hiking sticks, no crampons.
I wasn't sure if you needed any special supplies like crampons in case you did glacier walks or such.
Well, we did slide down a couple of snow hills.
That had to be thrilling.
But enough to stop before, you went anywhere dangerous.
If you run into somebody you haven't seen in a while, but they know you went on the trip and they say, oh, how was Mont Blanc? What hits your mind first? What do you think of first?
Oh, the people and the scenery. Because everyone here thinks we're out of our minds. I think just the fact, just telling them how beautiful the whole area is and the mountains. I mean, we still can't forget that whole, what it looked like. Harry's in the process of doing our book on it. And then we had the opportunity to go hang gliding. I went tandem. I think it was hang gliding off the mountain. That was in our free day. So there was opportunities to do other things on your free day also. Probably the hang gliding was pretty impressive that I did it. And I may never do it again, but I did it.
I'm not sure I could do that. I'm proud of you there. And is your free day in Chamonix? Where's the free day?
The free day was in Chamonix. So that was the last full day we had there. Some people hiked. Quite a few of us. I think there were 7 of us that went hang gliding. Some had done it before. Harry and I had never done it before. But that's what we did on our free day. And they recommend the group that you go to, and they arranged everything. We just met them and did it. But there were so many people hang gliding. And when you see them against the mountains and the clouds, you're like, oh my God, they're pretty high up. And it was something to be seen.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd have the courage to do that. I'm a bit of a scaredy cat about things like that. I feel comfortable hiking, but I don't know about that up in the air stuff. So anyhow.
I don't like heights. And they said to me, oh, you run off the mountain and then you're up in the air. So I got hooked up with the guy that was tandem with me. I made sure he had a family that he loved. And I was the first one. He just said, stand up and take one step. We weren't even near the edge. And before we knew it, we were in the air. And I was like, whoa. So I didn't have time to anticipate to be scared. But it was amazing floating over the villages and seeing everything from that height. I mean, you were way above the mountains. I mean, it was pretty spectacular.
Now you're up in the air and there's no going back. Were you scared, or it's like, okay, I'm just going to go with it and enjoy it? Or how do you feel then?
I wasn't really scared. He was wonderful and we were chatting it up, and my stomach got a little queasy while we were up there. And at that point he said to me, before I told him my stomach didn't feel well, he said, oh, do you like roller coasters? And I said, this is like not the good time to ask me that. Let's just float like we are now. But he was explaining everything. He actually let me steer a little bit. And then the landing was so easy. And then I watched Harry go next.
There's one common theme I've found with the people I'm talking to is about how quickly you bond with the people you meet doing an adventure travel activity. Do you see that when you meet somebody, all of a sudden you just connect so quickly, or much quicker than you do back at home for some reason? Do you find that at all, or what's your experience with that?
The people we had, actually on both trips, but the people we had on this trip, we just bonded. There was one couple, the one that had their anniversary, we're planning to ski with them in Colorado. They were the kind of people that if you're near where they live or they want to come visit, you would just really have them over and be able to go visit them again or travel with again. We told Phil we were going on this, and he chose to come along with us, and we just had a great time with him again. So you really do form a bond, and you really get to know each other. You're together 24/7, really, other than sleeping.
And Phil, you met in Peru. You weren't friends before Peru?
No, we met in Peru, yeah.
This is once again another example of that bonding I keep talking about, how you'll meet these people when you're adventure traveling, that the bonds are so quick and so deep that you end up traveling with people that you didn't know previous to that trip. This is how I've been traveling in the last couple of years. I'll meet somebody on one trip, and that arranges a next trip that I'm going. And I'll meet somebody on that trip, and then I'll end up joining them on yet another trip. And I keep calling it like this interwoven slinky that's gotten all tangled, because you get all these interconnected friendships, and it's so cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is there anything that I did not ask you that you wish that I had that you would like our listeners to know about the Tour de Mont Blanc?
I just think they're very well organized. They're very clear with their itineraries. They're very clear with packing lists. They're very clear with costs. They're very clear screening people to see if this trip is good for them. They answer all your questions, especially when you're trying to pick which trip might be the best one to do. They have one to the Galapagos. They said, you may want to save that till you're older. They want to know what you're interested in seeing. I just think I would really recommend Active Adventures. We had nothing critical to say about them or negative to say about them. And the fact that all these other people, even the girl that was in the earthquake in Nepal with Active, never thought twice about not repeating another trip with them, really tells you something, because she was there with them during a catastrophe. And she said they just handled it really well. And that says something to Active, to be able to respond to something like that that's so catastrophic that you're not expecting. I think the prices are fair. And the fact that, you do some kayaking and biking, but the majority is hiking, which is really what we wanted, as opposed to other trips that do hiking but may have, just as much biking or something else.
Oh, and I wanted to ask you too, you had a local guide as well as an American guide, or how does that work?
We had a local guide. He was amazing. He actually carried the torch when the Olympics were in Chamonix. He was amazing. I mean, he's done this all his life. Him and Corinne, who was the driver, were wonderful. We also have Andy, who was from Active Adventures, but pretty much the local guide did all the guiding and answered all our questions. I mean, Andy was great because he helped everyone with whatever they needed as far as questions regarding the trip. But the local guides, we had another guide in Peru that actually was hired, that is an Active Adventure group leader, who was also amazing. They're just respectful of the local people, as well as us, as well as anybody they run into, which says something about their character.
There's a few more things I want to talk to you about the Mont Blanc. You may have heard that this glacier-covered mountain is the deadliest mountain in the Alps, and this is true. However, I want to emphasize that you're not actually hiking Mont Blanc, but you're actually hiking around in the mountain range and looking at it to see its majesty. Mont Blanc, at just under 16,000 feet or 4,800 meters, is about twice as tall as the mountains you'll be hiking on this tour. The Mont Blanc circuit is not a technical hike or a climb, but it's a walk. However, there are times that it's a difficult walk, so you really need to train for it. I'll put on the website how I would personally train for this hike. I'll put the details on the activetraveladventures.com website for this particular episode number 7. I think the key to training is just consistency. In a nutshell, I basically, at least twice a week, I'll use my backpack with a little bit of weight to get used to carrying some weight on my back. And then once a week, I'll do a little bit longer hike of like 2 to 3 hours. And I'll start that maybe 2. I try to do 3, but at least 2 months beforehand, I'll do that. But that's it in a nutshell. You'll find more notes on the website. Once a year, usually late summer, late August, early September, ultramarathoners run the trail in about 21 hours. So you want to make sure to find out when they're running so you can avoid them unless you want to go see them. But if you are going to be there on the day they're running, you want to make sure you book your accommodations in advance because everything's going to get booked. An interesting historical note is that in the late 1700s, Mont Blanc was finally climbed and created the sport of mountaineering. As part of the Mont Blanc massive mountain range, Mont Blanc is the highest point in Western Europe and the tallest in the EU. This beautiful region attracts over 6 million visitors per year. 20,000 alone just hiked the Mont Blanc Trail. To avoid snow, it's best to go in late June and finish up by early October. I would even say maybe make that a little bit earlier. I would try to finish by mid-September myself. That's not to say you're not going to have any snow, because mountains can always be unpredictable, but you're likely to have the best weather during this time frame. Remember, it can be chilly and even cold, even in the summer, often 40 to 60 degrees during the day, which is 5 to 15 degrees Celsius, and lower at nights. I would keep my thermal jacket and my rain gear with me at all times to be prepared for any sudden change of weather. The mountains can be unpredictable weather-wise. I would figure your pack weight to be somewhere around 20 pounds, about 9 kilograms. You might want to pick up a copy of my personal packing list at activetraveladventures.com. On this hike, you're going to be walking in several different ecosystems, from fields and pastures at the lower elevations to Arctic tundra and alpine meadows higher up. If you can, you want to allow some extra time to sightsee, as you're going to go through some really cool areas, especially Chamonix, which was the site of the first Winter Olympics in 1924. It has one of the oldest ski resorts in France, and it faces the north side of the Mont Blanc summit. I hope you've enjoyed this tour of the Mont Blanc. Please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a future episode. If you're not sure how to, just go to the front page of the activetraveladventures.com website and I'll walk you through it. I'd ask you to please share this episode with some of your adventurous friends. Better yet, why don't you grab your friend and plan to hike the Mont Blanc together? While this trail is perfect for solo hikers, it's also great to have companionship as well. And be sure to pop me an email and let me know how you did, and post some photos on the Active Travel Adventures Facebook group. Our thanks to Linda for sharing her adventure. If you want to connect with Linda, you can find her on Facebook at Linda Cohen Dickens. I do want to mention, too, if you're interested, I was interviewed on the Zero to Travel podcast by Jason last week about an Alaskan adventure I did doing an Alaskan cruise, but not your typical cruise. I used the Alaskan ferry system, which goes to the same ports as the fancy cruise lines, but this is a way to do it on the cheap. It's not an adventure trip the way I did on this trip, but if you're interested, I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. And also, I did do a travel planner that I'll include in this month's newsletter that you're welcome to get that'll help you plan that trip pretty easily. I'll see you next time. Until then, adventure on!